Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Zoom Room B for the Migration and Displacement session. My name is Abby Steinbach. I'm a fellow with My Dog is My Home, and I've also lived and worked in various fields of social work with many different families, including human animal families in Central America, Florida, Chicago, Wisconsin, and I am honored to be your moderator today. 2021 was a year, to say the least, in some cases hopeful, and in other cases quite devastating. As My Dog is My Home planned for our 2022 conference and took into account all of the ways homelessness and the human-animal bond manifest, we could not ignore the major political conflict and climate-related emergencies that were leading to record levels of displaced people around the world. According to the UNHCR, or the UN Refugee Agency, more than 84 million people were forced from their homes in 2021. Many people who flee from or lose their homes due to forced migration and displacement also face homelessness and the potentially traumatic experience that can come with that. Some describe refugee camps as similar to homeless encampments, or at the very least, they are emergency accommodations that we hope are temporary. As climate change continues to impact our communities, hitting the most vulnerable the hardest, and as we see escalating conflict, invasions, and wars unfolding around the world at this very moment, our hearts are with them as we are likely to see migration and displacement trends continue to rise. And while it is tempting to see this as a uniquely human problem, companion animals are affected too. Animals are a part of our family and social systems. They feel and form attachments, and sometimes they travel with their families seeking safety or are adopted during their journey, very often giving tremendous love, companionship, and security to their human family members. Despite companion animals providing this lifeline and emotional support, challenges may keep asylum seekers from entering the US or other countries with their pets. Internationally, many of us have been watching the recent invasion of Ukraine. While this session was planned prior to this, we recognize that may be weighing heavily on our minds and our hearts. We have seen the European Commission recognize human-animal families recently in their decision to advise all European Union member states to relax veterinary paperwork requirements for dogs, cats, and other companion animals with refugees seeking safe passage in EU member states. If folks are interested in learning more about this, I will paste a link from the Humane Society International in the chat about that. Today, we are going to hear from a representative of a group doing the important work of supporting the human-animal bond for people seeking asylum across the Texas-Mexico border. JORDYN ROZENSKY is the communications specialist for the National Immigrant Justice Center's communications team. She holds a master's degree in public policy from Brandeis University. She is the co-founder of Mascotas para Migrantes and lives on the border in El Paso, Texas, with 3 dogs and 3 cats. JORDYN, it is truly an honor to have you with us today. I am really eager to hear from you about your experiences and what you've learned during the course of your work carrying out the mission of Mascotas para Migrantes. And whenever you are ready, please begin.
Great, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? Excellent. And Levi, are you ready with the slides?
Sorry, 1 second. My computer's angry.
That's no problem. It's always hard coming back from a break.
Yes.
So as we wait for Levi to get the slides up, I'm happy to start with a little bit of an introduction. Although Abby did a wonderful introduction, I'm not sure how much more I have to add to that. My name is JORDYN ROZENSKY. I am one of the founders of Mascotas para Migrantes. And as mentioned, I live here in El Paso, Texas, on the border. I can actually see Mexico out my window. You can go ahead and bring up the next slide. So you can get an idea a little bit about who you're talking to today. My name is JORDYN ROZENSKY. I am the human pictured in that photograph. I live here in El Paso with 2 Basset Hounds, a Great Dane, and 3 indoor cats and a slew of outdoor cats as well. And also pictured here is one of our Mascota para Migrantes clients, Tokia, who I was lucky enough to temporarily foster as he was in the process of being reunited with his humans. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So I want to take a step back before we even get too much into the weeds. So I just make sure that we're all on the same page. I want to introduce a couple of terms that I'm going to be using today. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. And if I see them, I'll try to clarify as I move along. But I'm going to be talking about refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants today as I talk about this program. And those 3 terms are all used to describe people who are on the move. Basically, anyone who has left their home country, has crossed borders, and are, for whatever reason, are seeking to live somewhere else. And I'll be specifically speaking about asylum seekers. And I just want to state, to clarify as well, I am here wearing my official Mascotas para Migrantes hat. It's a volunteer organization. And everything that I say here is what I believe, and not necessarily something that you might want to quote to NIJC or the National Immigrant Justice Center where I work, although they agree with most of what I will be saying here. So immigration laws in the United States makes it states that asylum is a human right, and there's a legal obligation to protect those who are refugees, who are asylum seekers. There is absolutely nothing illegal about coming to the border and asking for asylum. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page starting there. And an asylum seeker is that person who has left their country, like I mentioned. They're seeking protection from persecution, from human rights violations, from all sorts of things that might give them a fear of returning to their home country. And as an asylum seeker, you're someone who hasn't received a decision yet on your asylum claim, which would make you into a refugee, sort of legally speaking. And then our next slide. So the other thing that I'm going to be speaking about today is our program came out of something known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, which is kind of a poorly named program that was begun under the Trump administration. Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, you might have also heard of it as Remain in Mexico, is some way that it is sometimes referred to. And MPP is basically a program that forces asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while they're pursuing their asylum claim in the United States. The vast majority of those people in MPP have had no attorneys while facing proceedings, are kind of lost in this process. And throughout my work, I have worked with many individuals who have just faced unimaginable violence under MPP. These are women, children, family members who are sent to dangerous areas along the border to wait out their asylum claim without any resources, without any assistance. Women and children who are kidnapped, who are extorted, who are sexually assaulted. It's a very dangerous situation, and not a safe program or safe places to be waiting while you're making your asylum claim. So on to our next slide. And I want to just root us why we're here. This is a photograph of an asylum seeker and her dog Nala when they were reunited in the United States. And a quote from one of our clients: pets are so important when you're in a situation like I was. They don't let you fall because they depend on you, and they helped me feel less alone. And I think that is the root of a lot of why we're all here today, and why we care about co-sheltering and companion animals and the roles that they play, and the roles that they play for asylum seekers who are stuck in horrible situations. So we can advance. So the need. After 2 years, the MPP program, it was temporarily disbanded. And so I'll be talking for a little bit about what happened during the period where it was disbanded. Unfortunately, MPP is happening again under the Biden administration. So after 2 years, like I said, MPP was temporarily disbanded. And some families, they were given the opportunity to enter the United States while they wait for their asylum claims, while they go through the process. There was nothing sort of in that process that stops people from entering the United States with their companion animals, except for bureaucratic red tape. So when folks were being processed out of MPP, they were given a short period of warning, told to report to a UN office, and where they were COVID tested, processed, helped over the bridge into the United States, and then often moved into temporary shelters or reunited with families. And those temporary shelters often didn't allow for animals. But they weren't allowed to bring their animals, their companion animals, with them to the headquarters where they were being processed out. So that sort of was the red tape that kept people from being able to cross over. And I'll just sort of note this photo here. Is actually a photo of me playing with a cat in one of the shelters. His name is Tony. And there's two young girls there whose faces are purposely obscured to protect their privacy. But it was just a moment of such joy playing with Tony, who they cared for, along with other families in the shelter. And when they were presented with the opportunity to finally enter the United States, they weren't allowed to take Tony. So we can move on to the next slide. So that was the need. Now came the question, how do we help? So lawyers and activists, we started receiving phone calls. Families were placed in these terrible situations. They had their animals, some that they had adopted while they were stuck in MPP, some that they might have brought with them. And they were given this opportunity to finally move to safety in the United States, to finally pursue their asylum claims, to finally be reunited with members of their community, to finally be reunited with members of their families. But they were told they had to leave their animals behind in order to do that. And that's an impossible situation for most people. And before we get too sad, I did want to include here, this photo is Tomas the cat, and this is him in the United States with his family about to board a plane after they were successfully reunited. So don't worry, we have some happy stories. And we can move on to the next slide. So we have the need. How do we help? We're hearing these horrific stories. And that's where Mascotas para Migrantes started. A small group of volunteers began working to help asylum seekers. The first thing we started to do was research. Okay, what does it take to bring a dog, to bring a cat, to bring a turtle, to bring a ferret, to bring a duck? These are all animals that we were reached out about. What does it take to bring them into the United States? For dogs and cats, it actually took very little. To cross into Texas, which is where we began, and we eventually also worked in California and Arizona. To cross into Texas, they needed a rabies vaccine. We just needed proof of a rabies vaccine. So that was the first step, figuring out what we needed to do to physically bring these pets over the bridge, over the border into the United States. And then we started thinking, how do we do this? How do we research? How do we provide transportation? How do we meet people and bring their dogs over? How do we assist with travel information? A lot of these individuals are coming into the United States, and then they're trying to figure out, well, they're not staying in Texas, they're not staying in El Paso, they're not staying in San Diego. How do we get them and their pets to wherever their final destination is? And we also offered temporary fostering because, like I said, sometimes these shelters that people would cross into didn't allow them to have their animals with them, so that we would have to hold on to them. And this photo here, actually, everything you see in that photo is donated. We had a lot of great people who mobilized, and we were able to provide sort of kits like this for anyone who was going to do a temporary fostering situation. They were kind of being able to be given everything that they needed. So when we had someone who was going to foster, all they needed to do was provide their home and their love, and everything else we provided. So we can move on to the next slide. This is a photo of a woman reuniting with her dog Candy. And what she shared was about her time stuck in Juarez with her dog Candy. She said, "You feel so alone, and your pets help take you out of that loneliness with the love they give you. They're your companion. They give you emotional support when you don't have anyone." And I was lucky enough. Candy was one of the dogs that I met her. I crossed over into Mexico. I met Candy. I brought her over. I kept her with me, and then I was able to reunite her with her human, and that's this photo right here. They're just steps onto United States soil, reunited after they didn't think it was possible. And it was such a heartwarming moment. The other thing I love when I sort of reflect on this particular story, or when I share this photo, is look at the little bows. Look at the bows in Candy's ears. I was so struck by this. This wasn't something I did. This was when I went over to meet Candy. Candy's human was going through so much. She had been stuck in a dangerous situation for 2 years, away from her entire family. She was in the process of trying to seek asylum, of trying to go through this nightmarish maze-like process of legalese. She had very little funds. She had very little support. And one of the things that she did was she took her dog to the groomer, and she had her, completely dolled up with these bows, so that when she entered the United States, she was as beautiful as she possibly could be. And that, I mean, I hate to say it, but my work in the immigration field, we have very few stories where they just make me incredibly happy, or they make me tear up with happiness. Candy's bows, they're amazing. Just the love and what went into getting Candy to the United States. So we can go on to the next slide. Another story for you. This is Brandon. Brandon makes me laugh. I love his little mullet. Brandon was a situation where there were about 12 dogs and cats who had sort of been left behind by folks who are in the process of crossing over into Eagle Pass, Texas. It's a small crossing. It's a very sort of small area, kind of not close to anything else, or at least not close to anything else near me in Texas. And I had no volunteers there. And yet we kept hearing, here's another dog, here's another cat, here's someone else who is being left behind. We needed to get them not just across the border, we also needed to get them up to a major city, up to San Antonio or up to Austin, in order to reconnect them with their humans who relied on them, who needed them. And we put out a little bit of an ask, and we were able to get volunteers who were willing to drive down from San Antonio to cross over with the animals, to drive them up to 3 hours back up to San Antonio and help them get to the places where they needed to be. So it was a great moment of community coming together. And the biggest sort of need whenever people ask how they can support this program is we need volunteers who can help with things like this. So we can move on to the next slide. And what we see with asylum seekers, here on the border, elsewhere, it's this common experience of loss. We've talked about loss in various different ways throughout this conference. And with asylum seekers, you're looking at individuals who they have to leave their entire sense of normalcy behind them. They leave their homes, they leave their relatives, they leave their communities, they leave their work, they leave their relationships, their favorite foods, everything they've ever known. And after surviving so much trauma, pets really become this lifeline of emotional support, this lifeline of normalcy, this feeling that helps them get through the trauma. And that's what made it such an impossible decision for so many people. How am I going to get my pet? How am I going to get my dog or my cat across the border into Texas or into California? So on to the next slide. And here, this is a cat. His name is Sebastian. He was the first ever pet that we crossed. I was able to cross Sebastian. He belonged to this woman who consented to having her picture shared, and her partner. He worked at nights, so Sebastian really became sort of her her companion. You know, she was home alone a lot. She was afraid. She didn't have a lot to do, and Sebastian was really important. He was really there for her. And this was at the airport. They were about to get on a plane and get to Miami and be reunited with her father. And you can just see the joy on her face. You can't necessarily see the joy on Sebastian's face because he is a cat and he was not, you know, expressing too much happiness at that point, but he was really happy to be with her again. So we can move on to the next slide. So I did want to pause, and I really appreciate, Abby, that you brought this up in the beginning of the session. I actually added a couple of slides yesterday because I wanted to talk about Ukraine and what was happening there. This is a universal experience, unfortunately. This is a picture, it's not one of mine, that was taken. This is a man who is escaping right now. He's in a refugee situation. He's looking to leave Ukraine with his dog. And you can just sort of look around this photo and you can see people don't have a lot of things. When you're, you know, given the opportunity to leave and because of violence, you don't have a lot of time to pack and prepare and think about what you're going to take with you. And it's not easy. And this individual, clearly, you can see from this photograph, he was not going to leave his dog behind. So, you know, it's a universal experience with refugees. And if we move to the next slide, I wanted to share some resources. These are resources that these are not necessarily research that I've done. This is sort of like a cursory internet search. And one of the things that I wanted to point out that was so amazing, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia are allowing Ukrainians to bring their pets across the borders without any paperwork, which is amazing. You know, there's a lot to be said about sort of what borders mean and how things can be arbitrary, but this is an example of, you know, bordering countries saying, you know, we understand it's really important that you need to bring your companion animals with you. And when you escaped violence, you might not have had time to grab your rabies certificate or other sort of vet paperwork. So that is heartening to see. I also included a list here of a couple of different sanctuaries and rescues in Ukraine who are working to support animal shelters who have pets left behind, as well as a shelter that's working with a farm sanctuary. And then there's also the International Animal Protection League, which is an animal refugee outside of Kiev. So we can move to the next slide, which is just is another photograph here of a woman in Ukraine who is leaving with her 2 cats. And I personally myself, like I mentioned, I have 3 cats. I traveled the United States for 14 months in a camper van with 2 cats. And I know what that wrangling feels like and what she's going through right in that moment. And she knows she's not leaving without her cats. And like I said, it's a universal feeling, and it's weighing on all of us right now. So on to the next slide. So like I mentioned kind of in the beginning of the chat here, MPP has begun again. There's a lot that we can go into that, but I won't go too deeply into it. But MPP began again under the Biden administration. So the short period of time that we had where we sort of were explicitly working under, you know, MPP, folks are being processed out, we're here to help, that's over. We don't have that opportunity anymore. People aren't coming in the same sort of way. But we were able to establish ourselves in this short period of time enough that people still come to us with various questions. So we have folks on a regular basis who didn't know that we existed, and they left their dog or their cat with a family member, with a friend, and then they found out about us, and now they're in a situation where they'll do anything to get their pet back with them. So we'll work to sort of meet up with their family member or friend, bring the animal across the border and reunite them. That's mainly, we do a lot of that work right now. We also sometimes do detective work. So this dog here, her name is Ruby. Ruby is a really sad situation, and unfortunately, I don't have a good ending to this story, but Ruby ended up in a shelter here in El Paso. She was with a young man, a minor, when he crossed into the United States, and he was picked up and put into custody. He's in OR custody right now as a minor crossing by himself into the United States, and he was separated from Ruby. And we have been working hard to try to figure out where this individual ended up, this young man, so that we can reunite him with Ruby. And in the meantime, a wonderful lawyer here in El Paso has taken responsibility for Ruby, has been caring for her, has been training her. And, you know, the ideal situation is that we're able to reunite Ruby and her human, but we probably won't be, but we're trying, and we hear about situations like this as well. So on to the next slide. So, you know, I wanted to just kind of leave us with a couple of happier images. Here's another situation where a brilliantly happy human was reunited with their brilliantly happy animal, and you know, that's the best part about this program. You know, asylum seekers have been through so much, and you know, they're often sort of reduced in the media, or even reduced in policies, or the way we talk about them, to just a statistic, just, you know, a faceless, nameless story. And when we think about treating someone, an individual, as a whole person, we think about treating them with dignity, we think about treating them with respect. And part of that for us with Mascotas is thinking about the bond that they have with their animals, and understanding that that's important, and understanding what role those pets play for them. So we're not just going to ignore it. We're going to try to work with them and treat them with that dignity and respect to bring them, you know, back together with their pet. So I think I might have one more photo. I might not. Nope, that's the last photo. So that is my talk for today. And I guess I'll turn that back over to you, Abby.
Jordyn, thank you so much. We're so honored to have you join us today, and the work you're doing is so important. And we just appreciate you being here. We appreciate everything you're doing, and I'm a big fan of yours. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to just babble and talk about the amazing animals that I've met through this program, and share how important it is. Appreciate it.
You've definitely done far more than babble, but we we appreciate it. So thank you so much. We are going to move into the question and answer portion of the event. So if folks have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat here. And I will do my best to get all of them asked. We do have a good amount of time. I think we have until about 4:45 Central Time. So I'll go ahead and just ask this first question here. How is Mascotas para Migrantes funded?
That's a great question. Like I mentioned, it's completely volunteer based. We are not a sort of registered nonprofit. We received some funding in terms of just individuals donating to us, occasionally through Venmo directly to some of the volunteers who are doing the work. We had an Amazon wish list, which included a lot of the supplies that we used. And, you know, it really kind of started with the fact that I have my own slew of animals, and I was like, great, these dogs, they can have some of my dog food, and we just kind of moved on from there. But it's really been, I mean, folks have been really amazing. Even just I think this weekend, someone must have shared our organization on Facebook, sort of in conjunction with, look what's happening in Ukraine, this is horrible, here's another organization that does great work. And I got like 4 or 5 Facebook messages. How do I donate? How do I support you? And, you know, right now, unfortunately, our work is really slow because we don't have the opportunity to sort of be working through this right now. So, you know, luckily we don't need too much right now, but it's kind of all come from individuals who believe in the work and are willing to help.
Thank you, Jordan. You have several messages, just so amazing. Appreciate this work so much. So grateful. One of the questions here, is this help only for asylum seekers?
So we began the program sort of based on this idea that we were working with folks who were enrolled in the MPP program, the Migrant Protection Protocol, the Remain in Mexico program, who were in this sort of very bureaucratic process of being able to seek asylum in the United States and not bring their pets with them. That being said, we hear from a lot of different people who have asked for help in various ways. And if we can help, we do not turn anybody away. So if there are folks who had to leave an animal behind in Mexico and are looking to reunite with them, as long as they're able to provide what we legally need, which is the rabies vaccination, then we do what we can do to help. We're in this really interesting situation where for a while, we were incredibly busy. We had like 50 or 60 animals on the wait list, and we were doing what we could do. Then MPP was reinstated, and we kind of stood down a little bit. So now occasionally it's really horrible. I'll get someone that reaches out. I had someone who reached out like 2 weeks ago in San Diego, and I wasn't able to find a volunteer on the ground because I just don't have people as sort of ready and waiting for my call anymore, but we do help whoever we can help.
Thank you, Jordan. I have a question here that says, I didn't realize MPP was happening again. What are some ways to advocate for the Biden administration to stop this policy?
That is a great question. So there is a Supreme Court hearing that's going to happen this summer about Remain in Mexico, and advocacy groups continue to sort of rally around the fact that this MPP 2.0, it is not any better than the original MPP, that there's no humane way to run a program like this. NIJC, where my full-time job when I'm not volunteering or running this program, you know, we've worked with folks on the ground and just seen how horrible this program is in a variety of different ways. You know, the power of social media right now, if you kind of go, there was a hearing this afternoon in the House, if you go kind of search #EndMPP, you can find a lot of information about that. There's also a lot going on with Title 42, which is something that turns asylum seekers and migrants away at the border. You know, there's a lot of advocacy that organizations need help with, and just raising the word about how horrible these programs are, for sure.
Thank you, Jordan. Let's see here. Trying to filter through a few of these and see. Okay, this one says, beautiful. I also work with clients who are undocumented. I was wondering if any legal information on attorneys whose expertise is on pets and their human rights. They work in New York City, and their center has legal services, but their expertise is not on rights of the animals that are with them. Do you have any advice for them?
That's a good question. I don't know if I necessarily have someone that I can connect you with. You know, the co-founder of the organization with me, Taylor, she's an amazing lawyer who works in the Bay Area. She's an immigration rights attorney, and she kind of helped me, as well as a couple of other volunteers, lawyers, attorneys, but we all kind of started from the same place, like, what kind of research can we do to just sort of figure out how we get these pets into the United States and what that kind of looks like. But we haven't really been able to go go beyond that. You know, we weren't really sort of in the position to advocate on pets and you know, and their rights. We really just were kind of looking at that very quick sort of Band-Aid fix of how do we keep people from being separated from their pets. But you know, I'm always happy to kind of brainstorm with you. If you know, wanted to reach out to me afterwards, I would love to kind of chat more about what that could look like.
Thanks, Jordan. One of the other questions was, is there anything that service providers could keep in mind when designing programs? And if there are like hurdles that you know that many families have faced or many people with animals have faced that service providers can keep in mind when they're designing their programming?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we faced sort of when we first began the program, we began it kind of locally in El Paso, and the biggest shelter for migrants, for asylum seekers, doesn't allow pets. And so that's kind of why we said sort of from the beginning, one aspect that we provide is temporary fostering. And that always, we made it very clear, we're talking 24 hours to, you know, a week, nothing more than that. Though I think we did have a cat that was with one of our volunteers for about 2 weeks due to some travel arrangement mishaps. But we had to do that because we could have helped people reunite with their pets right at the border and then said, here's your cat, here's your dog, good luck, knowing that if they couldn't afford to go to a hotel or they couldn't afford to immediately get on a bus or immediately fly somewhere, they wouldn't have a place to stay with their pets. So we had folks who, you know, we would go, we would meet with them, we would physically cross their pet across the border. Then, you know, within the next 24 hours, they would be processed out of MPP, but they wouldn't be ready to reunite with their pet because they had to go to a shelter that wouldn't allow pets. So, you know, I think that's the big question, right? When you're looking at folks who are needing assistance, who are temporarily, you know, without homes, when you're looking at various kinds of shelters, like, you know, for asylum seekers, you know, that don't allow pets, that's definitely it's definitely a problem for folks, and it was really important to us that we had that option, that pets could stay with a temporary foster until we were able to safely reunite with everyone.
Absolutely, that's thoughtful programming right there. I see a couple things here, referencing some organizations. Someone said that, you know, they see on your Facebook page you're looking for temporary fosters. You have posts for that. And they work with Austin Pets Alive, and wondering if you're aware of the PASS program there.
I'm not into that.
It's looks like they posted positive alternative to shelter surrender, Texas-wide place to post for temporary fosters, rehoming without a kennel, and fundraisers for pet fees, medical needs. In that same idea, there is another question here about if you have been able to connect or partner or get support from other, this person specifically asked immigrant advocacy orgs, but it seems just from the chat also animal welfare organizations.
Yeah, we haven't. So again, small volunteer run organization, but we are very well connected. So I think one thing that's really interesting is sort of like the story I shared about Ruby, the dog where we're looking for her human. I reached out to so many different individuals who said, oh, I already heard about that. Or yes, that was actually included in, you know, an email that was spread around this organization or this news. So, you know, we don't sort of have a lot of formal connections with different organizations, but we, you know, because we're an organization that was founded by immigration advocates and lawyers, we're able to sort of rely on some of our networks to kind of learn things, to pass things along, to ask for advice, to ask questions, you know, and learn about things in that way. We have sort of less connections formally with different organizations, animal rights-based organizations. You know, we did at one point have actually more than one organization reach out to ask if we needed help with, you know, medical needs, including spaying and neutering, and that wasn't sort of where our program was at or where it was going. Perhaps in the future, if we were to be growing in different ways, you know, that would be something really cool to think about. But we were kind of this stopgap measure where we're talking about getting animals from, you know, point A to point B with their humans, not necessarily looking at sort of what happens after point B.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the chat here and also just at all of the people in this session. And I think there's a huge wealth of knowledge and all sorts of wonderful things. So feel free to, if you're not already, pay attention to the chat here. Some folks are dropping their information, their emails of programs that they're involved in. If anybody does want to connect with each other, it's a good place if you're able to look at that or drop your own information to network and continue to keep in touch with each other. I do have another question here. Can fosters live anywhere, or does it have to be local, and are fosters screened?
We really only deal with the local fosters because transportation is already such an issue. So, you know, we don't transport, with the exception of those animals that we had to get sort of from that one crossing in Eagle Pass, Texas, up to San Antonio. We don't really transport very far. So we're looking at fosters who, you know, are right there on the border, who can do the work. And, you know, one thing that we have provided a lot of research, and that's one thing that I didn't actually go into. Sorry, we provide a lot of research around, okay, so if you need to now take your dog across the country, here's how you could possibly do it, but we don't do that ourselves. We don't do long transportations. And, you know, we also provide a lot of research because there were definitely animals that we wanted to help that we weren't able to. For instance, I mentioned a duck. Because of laws, ducks are considered poultry. So, you know, we had to work with that individual to sort of help them find a different way, a different home for their duck. Their duck's name was Lucas, by the way. So, you know, we don't do any of that transportation. We just do research around it. So that makes fosters kind of needed to be local. In terms of screening, we definitely do screening. We don't sort of have a formal process, but we talk to individuals about their comfort levels, you know, what kind of home they can provide, what is allowed, you know, if they rent, are they allowed to have animals, what kind of spaces that they can have, and kind of go from there. Again, it's a small program, so we've been lucky enough that for the most, we're able to kind of talk to people face to face or Zoom face-to-face to make sure that we're not putting any sort of animal in a foster situation that doesn't feel right.
Thanks, Jordan. I do have a question, just thinking about all over the world. We've referenced a lot of different things. And do you see, I mean, there is some hope in the European Union, you know, relaxing some of those veterinary requirements, paperwork, things like that. Do you see hope that other places will follow suit, or do you have any, I don't know, ideas to move that in that direction?
That's a great question. You know, I think I'm here sort of sharing my experiences and my stories, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of sort of insight into how those policies are made or changed around the world. You know, I think when I started looking into what was happening, in Ukraine, and I found a lot of hope seeing that people were talking about this. People were looking actively for solutions, asking how they can help, what that looked like, and that in itself gave me a lot of hope. I think, unfortunately, like I said, asylum seekers are so often, not kind of treated as full human beings. They're not given that dignity. They're not given that respect. And people seem to kind of just say like, well, you're lucky enough to be given an opportunity to come to the United States. You're going to complain about not being able to bring your dog. And I think that's just kind of why we're here, talking about sort of the importance of that bond and what that means, and how we can keep sort of that centered when we talk about individuals, and we talk about how these policies change and grow.
Absolutely. I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw kind of it phrased in a way that caring for humans and caring for animals is not a binary. So I like that too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if there are any other, looks like there's something in the chat here about just some more information on refugees and animals.
That's great. I love seeing those resources pop up. Like I said, mine was kind of a quick search. So I'm so excited to see that there are so many, organizations that are thinking about this.
Absolutely. And we are so grateful to you for thinking and acting on this. I guess I'll ask maybe one more question. I don't see any others in the chat here, but just something that I was curious about. If other folks are interested in replicating what you're doing, do you have a guide or anything that they could look at, or do you encourage them just to reach out to you directly?
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, our Facebook page is a good place to find me. If you send a message through that Facebook, I'll see it. There's a couple other folks who have access to that inbox, but I'm the one that's gonna probably respond. And we also have some of our documentation sort of needs and paperwork linked on a Google site there. We talk about what is legally required to bring an companion animal into Texas and into some other places, as well as some information about what airlines require and sort of how that kind of works. So that's a good place to look at some of that documentation. But if anyone is interested, especially anyone on the border, and kind of continuing this work and being a resource, please reach out to me. I would love to chat with you more. Like I said, our organization started, to address a need coming out of the Trump administration. It's changed. The policies have changed. We're not doing the same work that we started at, so we're not incredibly active. But there is a need, and we could use all the help that we could get. Let me. Someone just asked what my Facebook page is, so why don't I just drop that link into the chat? Just give me a second to give you the correct link. Otherwise, that won't do good for anybody. 1 second.
Thank you, Jordan. It looks like there's a number of links in there for folks. I know I mentioned it before, but I see a few more popping up. And I'll just remind everybody that this is recorded and going to be emailed out to all participants. And I believe the chat may also be, don't quote me on that, but I believe it may be, but definitely the presentation itself. So, that it may take about, I believe, a month to get out to you all, but just a reminder, it will get there. And thank you, Jordan, for putting the Facebook page in the chat there.
Of course, thank you for coming to spend this past hour with us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. We are concluding just a bit early, but that'll give you all a little bit of perhaps a screen break until we go back into the main room. And Jordan, once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank all of the participants so much for being here. This is applicable all over the entire world, and I'm grateful that you all care to listen and be here. So again, we'll be going back into the main room at 4:45 Central Time. Feel free to hang out here if you'd like. Otherwise, go ahead back there, and everyone be well.